Happy Monday, or
Happy Monday.
happy Saturday, actually.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I'll go with it.
we'll go with it. What are days anymore? Yeah. So for the audience out there, Matt and I are actually hang out in person together,
Yeah.
but we're in a wonderful chalet in Switzerland. And on Monday, I don't know where we'll be, and so figured we record this chat with you, Jess, while we'll have internet and are all in the same place. So anyway, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
I know I've seen you both sort of recently, which is nice.
Yeah.
Trying to like travel is happening again.
It is happening.
It's getting to be a bit much, honestly. Like at some point, I'm like, do I really want to go on this trip anymore? I don't know.
It's a first world problem, Matt.
Yeah, it's true. Right.
I want to get on another plane. Like,
yeah, well, that's cool. So Jess, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Sure. I'm Jess Haberman. I'm Director of Learning Solutions at Anaconda, former Senior Acquisitions Editor at O'Reilly Media, where I had the great privilege of being the Acquisitions Editor for Joe and Matt on their best-selling Fundamentals of Data Engineering. So that was awesome. And now at Anaconda, where I'm developing a learning platform and building all this content to help folks upskill and reskill in Python, data science, data engineering, machine learning, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
You've been in the publishing industry for a really long time too, right? Like
I have 14 years. So this is my first stint in a non-publishing job, which is it's great. It's in a lot of ways very similar. In a lot of ways totally not. But it's that was sort of an existential crisis leaving publishing, but I'm really enjoying my time at Anaconda for sure.
Now, your role there has changed pretty fast. Is that correct? I mean, I think you
That's right.
started out publishing adjacent there.
Yeah. So I started as a content strategist. Yeah. So Nucleus is our sort of our content knowledge platform, community platform, where we develop a bunch of like articles and webinars and reports and things like that. So I was sort of rolling with that while Anaconda had already sort of made the decision to invest in learning and develop a learning platform and had already licensed with SkillJar is the learning management system that we work with. And so I was sort of involved on the content strategist side in sort of, launching SkillJar and a private preview and things like that. And then, I think they realized that I had a lot of strong opinions. I had a vision for what we were going to develop. And they were like, I think you should just do this and become the director level for this learning program. And I was like, that's crazy. I started 3 months ago.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. Yeah, because you just got hired, and all of a sudden you're director, and I'm like, cool.
Yeah, but
a couple years.
Yeah, it was the right move. It was great. So I'm really happy. But yeah, it was definitely a shift, but it's really incredible. Anaconda is really invested in learning, in education, and it's really important to them. And so it's exciting that I get to really steer the strategic direction, which is totally what, I wanted.
And so what are your thoughts in general on tech content strategy right now as we're going through some economic turmoil and some layoffs in the tech industry? Like, how is tech publishing, tech content, tech training going to change, say, in the next couple of years?
It's interesting because I've seen this shift where like every tech company has a learning platform now. Like, they're all doing training. They're like a lot of folks were using SkillJar, for example. And it's mostly like product training, and it's either for their customers or even for their sales teams. So that tends to be the primary focus rather than like upskilling folks, but there are quite a few companies doing that now too. So it's a really busy sector. There's a lot of e-learning platforms. So I think, it's sort of, it's very like, the mad data landscape. It's like, how are we going to have this many? Like, they're not all going to survive. So I think like, I don't know. I'm curious what will happen. I think it will eventually start to like shrink, but at the same time, when you're in a like downturn, like upskilling and reskilling, that's exactly the kind of like work you want to be doing. That like doesn't go away in a bad economy. That's really sort of solid material. So we'll see. I think there's always a lot of people coming into data. And like data engineering in particular. I saw O'Reilly does an annual report on their learning platform, and data engineering year over year was up 35%, which is
It's all
crazy
because
to
of
me.
us. Yeah. So
Well, I think there's a bit of that for sure. I think like
We'll
a few
take
years
credit.
ago, we had a really small team on the data editor side. We grew that, and then there was like 4 or 5 of us, all developing content around data and data engineering, analytics, machine learning, and so of course you give that a couple years, and like it's all out there, all the content's available, you're gonna get more attention. So I definitely think there's that part of it too. But yeah, and I think just generally like the data space is changing a lot. I think though a lot of folks are coming to data practitioner work, you're not, data scientist being the sexiest job of the 21st century, like data scientist, that sort of role is shrinking and democratizing. I think not necessarily shrinking. I think a lot of people are still doing the work, but not calling themselves data scientists. But I think more non-technical people are kind of learning more about data and sort of moving into this field a little bit more. You're talking about Excel, Joe, on your podcast. And I know something like 1.3 billion people or something use Excel. I think we're going to see more folks, moving more technical, more into Python potentially, from that side too. So I think like it's still going to grow. And there's lots of opportunities to like bring the right content. I think for Anaconda, we're lucky we have 30 million people using Anaconda, so we have a big funnel of people that are coming to our products one way or the other, and just letting them know that we have learning content.
that's nuts. I didn't know you had that many. That's
Yeah.
that's like a city.
Yeah. A
It's
big
like
one.
all of like Manhattan, like new Python or something.
Yeah. I mean, it's taken years and years to build up this audience, and that's amazing. So it's all about how you leverage it now. Yeah.
It's all about how you leverage it,
Yeah.
right? And then keeping it interesting, keeping it relevant too. Because I think the thing in tech too is the danger is, you're hot one minute, then you're not. It's just like music at the end of the day. Like, hair metal was cool, then it wasn't.
Well, and that's what makes it hard with content too. Even with a book, we were trying to find that sweet spot so a book could live 3 to 5 years in print, and technology changes really fast. So, I don't have to work with that long of a window, but it's like, Pandas 2.0 came out and I was like, oh crap, is like all my stuff already like a problem, So, and we started with a lot of like on-demand training, because like I just wanted to get a bunch of the fundamentals out there and have something that people can kind of sit with and work at their own pace. We're doing a lot of live training now, and that's going really well. We're seeing a lot of attention for live courses, and with like, $49 for 2 hours, whatever, like people are paying it for some in-depth knowledge with like real experts. So that's really great. So I think that's definitely a scalable, area for us.
How long was your book out before Pandas 2.0 came out?
Yeah, it was so we had a on-demand training, with 1 or 2.
Okay.
And I don't actually think they're affected by the new Pandas changes. So thankfully, but
Okay.
but I think we're, and it's also a good opportunity to do like, oh, what's new in Pandas 2.0 course, so I think there's definitely opportunities to take advantage of that as well.
Yeah. I mean, let me give you kind of the counter question. Like, what happens if I'm a tech company and I don't do training and I don't invest in content?
I mean, I think there's plenty of places to send folks, I think, I don't think that's a problem. I think it's probably you want to develop a relationship with, some sort of learning provider, if you want your folks to sort of get up to speed quickly. And we're hopeful we're going to work with a lot of those companies. Certainly it's investing in learning in your own learning platform is like, it's a significant investment.
Yeah.
So it's not for everyone.
It's interesting because it seems like it's, you have your core business you're trying to run, whatever that is, right? You could be selling a database, could be selling a Python or whatever, right? But it's interesting you bring this up too, because it is something I've seen where every company is investing in some sort of a university or certification program, but their competency really needs to be focused on building the product and building the kind of the go-to-market with that. And education is one of these things where it feels like it's a cold start problem every single time. Like, do you really feel like being awesome at content and education is something that's your core competency. I mean, it's fascinating to watch. I've seen some companies, like Anaconda, I think does a world-class job. I would almost call you an education company that happens to, have an awesome, Python environment. Not the other way around. It used to be the opposite, but
Yeah.
a lot of other companies, I think they invest a lot into, university type, product X university and that kind of stuff. But it feels like it's definitely needs a lot of work too. So it
Yeah.
needs, but finding the person who can create that content, you can really steward that learning experience. That's a really rare person who's
Well, and
also
it's
technical.
tricky. Yeah, it's tricky. Like, you don't want it to sound like an advertisement for your business, but like that's exactly what it is in a lot of cases.
Yep.
So it's really hard to thread the needle there. And it's a really savvy audience, like they're gonna see right through you if you're not like authentic. So as you guys know, and even when you are authentic, they're gonna give you a hard time
In our
regardless.
pretentious Swiss chalet, yeah,
That's right.
It's like,
right.
yeah, but apart from that, we keep it real.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think what made our shows really popular, and I think the thing that stands out is I think Matt and I have just always had a really candid take on stuff, and people like that. Anything that's scripted or canned, like I tell people, like, I don't do that. That's
Mhm.
kind of a
Yeah.
guy. So,
Mhm.
but but it does seem like as well the companies I've seen that are really good at content, they tend to just be really authentic, and that's a word I really hate to use these days because I think it's kind of it's a bit trite, but
I mean, it's kind of
true.
been captured by like now influencers all try to create a persona that's authentic, which means
Yeah, but they all look the same too, right?
Authenticity is
Yeah.
inauthentic now, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
it's a tough problem.
Mhm. Mhm.
Interesting. I feel like, yeah, every tech company we talk to has some kind of education arm. They're
Yeah.
excited about doing the marketing content and like having their DevRels out there talking to people. They're a lot less excited about running trainings, even though they charge a lot of money. So like some major vendors, I won't say the name, they charge a lot of money for training, but fundamentally they really don't want to be doing it. They'd rather
No, they don't
outsource
want
it
to do
to
that
someone
either.
else.
And
Yeah,
they also,
services.
like, the DevRel part's interesting too, because
Yeah.
they'll hit up people like us. They might have people, like a lot of our friends, and and try and get in on stuff. And so it's interesting because everyone's clamoring for the same like kind of pool of influence and attention.
Well, it's hard to do DevRel and training if you
Right.
put them together. If you think that they're going to do all of it in one, kind of one team. Like, our DevRel team are amazing, pretty new in terms of like I think maybe last fall we
Right.
developed a DevRel team. And they're awesome, and they do help quite a lot with training material, but like they've got a lot, they do a lot of travel, they've got a lot on their plates, they have a lot of other initiatives, and like we wouldn't be able to like manage if we only relied on the DevRel team to be able to develop training. So you've got to have two different strategies there.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So I guess what are some of the more popular ways you're seeing you know education being effective right now? Like, are there certain formats of maybe a video, maybe different? What's sort of the rubric for stuff that works these days?
Well, it's interesting because like boot camps real hot, like, but also like very like controversial sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
litigious. Like if you're not, getting somebody a job immediately after a boot camp, like you're gonna maybe get in trouble. I mean, it's kind of a wild like area.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I see Zach's been working on like his boot camp, and he's got like 7,000 people who are interested in it, and he's doing a 6-week, twice a week sort of boot camp for 30 people, and I think that was really smart. I think he's going to have a lot of success with that
Yeah,
sort of
he
model.
will. Yeah, Zach Wilson for the audience
Yeah,
out there.
yeah.
Sorry.
So the Owen Wilson of the data world.
Right.
So, but
So it's interesting. Like
yeah.
we're interested in that format, but we're not interested in, I don't know, creating something that doesn't feel like real and valuable. So I think we're going to do a variation on that. but that, gives people real fundamental skills, and that also gives them some access to like data science experts, and gives them feedback on their, their portfolio, for example. So I think like that's a little bit of where we have an opportunity. We have like really incredibly smart people in Anaconda who are really interested in giving back, in terms of education. So I think there's some great opportunities there. But it's just like the market is flooded with content, it's how do you stand out? I think in Anaconda, we're lucky in that we're starting from scratch. So we're starting with like a clean slate, and we can really curate the experience for our users rather than just giving them, tons and tons of choices. We'll just make the choices for you. We'll let you know, like, here's what you need, and here are the real experts who can, help you along the way. But we'll see. I think we've had some really good feedback so far. So hopefully that continues and we can continue to grow it. But yeah, I think there's a variety. On-demand video, it's interesting. Like O'Reilly, we kind of like quieted down on-demand video and then went like whole hog into live training, which was very successful. But I see they're going back to on-demand video again. So I don't know. It sort of swings,
Yeah, it does. It's interesting too. And in-person workshops are back. I'm noticing that's coming back. It doesn't seem like people are attending those as much. It's sort of but virtual workshops, it's like I've always struggled. I didn't want to do live trainings because it felt like it was like live virtual ones, because it felt like there's just a lot of failure points that can go wrong. In an in-person workshop, for example, if somebody can't install a certain dependency, like you can go help them out.
Interesting,
right? But
see, I feel the opposite. Totally opposite. Like, that you can, with a live training, you record it, you just move forward. And if you don't worry about the folks who like can't, their tech setup they're confused or whatever, you find a way to like help the back end. And, you have a producers on the event who can kind of help them one-on-one, but you get the trainer to just like keep going. And then like it's recorded so everyone can go back and take it at their own pace. So to me, they're easier. There are fewer things that, you kind of get hamstrung by, like, versus like, if someone's struggling in front of you in person, like that's hard to like just like ignore them and move forward. Probably not a great idea.
Just leave them behind. It's
fine.
To go on. Yeah.
They don't need CPR.
That's
right.
We're not. It's terrible. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I sort of wonder. I feel like COVID has changed the education landscape, but I don't know where we're going to land yet. Basically,
well, I mean, we started teaching we did our SQL class at the University of Utah right when COVID broke out, right, and like that was interesting because I think people were trying to get used to the online university experience. They had to deal with us. So, and we were trying to figure that out too. Because I mean, Matt's used to teaching in a regular classroom setting. I mean, you've done some virtual stuff before, right?
Yeah, I had, but I always preferred classroom teaching, and so it was a certainly different experience.
But now I kind of struggle because I think they wanted us to go back and teach like a 4-hour class or something like that, like once or twice a week, and
show up for 4 hours in the evening from like, I don't know, what was it?
It's like 6 to 10 or something. 6 to 10. Yeah.
You're like, I couldn't possibly. That's crazy.
Well, but I mean, but you got to figure out like, okay, so what's the agenda for each class, right? So there's a lot of stuff to cover, and like 4 hours, that's a lot of time. So I mean, how long were your math classes back in the day you would teach?
I mean, usually they're an hour at a time.
Exactly.
Sometimes I would have like 2 hours classes in like fast terms and such, like 6-week terms. But for the most part, you can't absorb. It's very hard to absorb math for 2 hours straight, right? Like just to get someone talking at you.
Yep. I know that's been my role in math classes, no longer than 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
well, it's interesting though. I think there's elements of the in-person experience that you still try to capture. I think it's important to have like a personality behind the trainer, and which is where I could be wrong. We'll see as AI generated professors happen and things like that. But, I think that that's still important to learners, that they like feel like they're comfortable and they can kind of trust their professor, and that like they believe their professor knows what they're talking about, and they feel comfortable asking questions and things like that. So I still think there is a little bit of that in-person kind of chemistry that you want to try to develop, but yeah, otherwise it is pretty different of a medium.
Mm-hmm.
The AI professors thing is very interesting.
Well, you could
to me.
personalize each professor for each student.
You could, but then for now, the major problem is that they would teach you wrong information. And honestly, I've seen, I'll be frank, I've seen some efforts, some products, like learning products based on this. And I looked at what they were providing and like, no, that's not, they're not giving correct information. This is negative learning for students. It's stuff they're going to have to unlearn later. So.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to talk more about that later. But yeah, I think the like gap where I think the hardest part for us is like having like a, teaching assistant or some tool that like actually can intake students' code and tell you, and give feedback on it. That is still like a pretty human experience. And it seems like there's been strides towards that, but that's, I think, the biggest challenge that I would love if we could figure that out in the near future.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, and even just the basic stuff too, like this user experience of these, these platforms. I mean, it's so hit and miss. Some of them are great. Some of them are abysmal. And then, you follow that all the way through kind of to the certification and, the test prep. And it's like, test prep is another one, certifications. Man, I have a lot of certifications. And it's such a weird, disjointed experience.
I
mean, some cases you might have to go to Udemy, and Lord knows what you'll find there. Some are great, some are completely irrelevant. I will call out for the Snowflake exam, for example. If you're going to take that, the stuff you're going to find online isn't going to prepare you for the exam as well as you think. So that also speaks to, I think, a poorly written exam in some cases. And I think there's others that would, I think, attest to that. It's so, but
I struggle.
What's that?
I struggle with the sort of user generated content model. I mean, coming from publishing, it's like, I'm never going to get like wrap my head around that, like that, you're kind of intaking what's given to you and sort of deciding, letting the public decide how good it is, and then like kind of giving the good rank stuff, giving that the highest, ranking, highest priority in front of your users. But like, it's just tricky when you have very little control over the content, and it could be like incorrect information, but you just don't have something like, newer or better. So yeah, that's I'm not gonna go that route if I can avoid it.
Smart. Interesting. So you with user generated content, it's interesting because I think there was a model where I think with the rise of MOOCs, especially, it was kind of expected that maybe users could help each other, maybe there'd be a kind of community thing, and then MOOCs would take over, ultimately take over universities and whatnot. And but now what's funny about some of these MOOCs is like it's actually like Ivy League universities who pretty much own the entire platform. And so it's a but user generated content is interesting too, because the YouTube experience, I would say a lot of people learn stuff on YouTube now. That's I would say overwhelmingly where like I did a podcast with Dave Langer on my other podcast, and he does Excel tutorials, and he blew up. But his first big video was like data science with R. That was in 2014, and that got like I think over 1 or 2 million views or something like that, which is kind of crazy. And it was a horrible video, which he'll tell you, it was like just him at his computer, talking about just with R Studio, just doing R stuff. It was like, that's crazy, right? But
I loved your podcast with Dave. I don't know him personally, but I thought it was really interesting conversation. I think both about how a YouTube like personality, which he probably wouldn't call himself, like kind of like grows their base that way, even if the content is sort of not like highly produced and stuff like that. And just really I just like his perspective on like meeting people where they are, that like he's mostly working in notebooks, like he doesn't really need more than that. And how many folks are, what they're using Excel for, and that it's, they don't need anything like really that much more complicated. So I think that's a really helpful way. That's the way I try to think about approaching our learners, and like, what are they using? What do they need? Not sort of like, be like, well, go learn machine learning because that's cool. Like you might not need anything like that. Even data science might not need machine learning at all. So making sure that they're getting the fundamentals so they understand what tools, what levers they need to pull based on like what their outcome, is.
I mean, unfortunately, a lot of education in the tech space is kind of revolved around posturing. We've seen this quite a bit. So, for example, someone in a college classroom will like stand up one Spark notebook, and then on their resume they'll put, "I know Spark." It's like, no, you just.
Well, and they put that they know Bash because they use the command line to set it up.
So right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's great that you use this tool, but like, first of all, you don't really need it. You actually need to focus much more on fundamentals.
Yeah.
And second, you don't know it. Like, this is it's going to take a huge amount of time to really learn this, which is great if you need to do that, but just going into a class or buying a book or turning something on is not the same as getting an education. And I think we need better foundations in many cases.
Yeah. Well, and I love too that actually we do see that in terms of the interest in math content is like through the roof.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was the case at O'Reilly, and it's still the case. People really want math fundamentals because they're getting into machine learning and then they don't know how to fix their models or whatever. Like they need to actually understand the basics about why things work and like how to fix them and sort of like just the under the hood sort of information. So yeah, we're trying to do that, but that's really popular. I think folks who are coming from more of a programming background are realizing like that's their weak spot.
Yeah. I mean, to be frank, too, it's a weak spot for machine learning professors as well, from what I've seen. They'll do a very good job explaining neural nets, explaining software, explaining machine learning concepts, but then they'll have a math section. The math section is not so well explained. Maybe that's me being, I don't know, a pretentious math professor, but
right.
Well, but it's true though. I mean, because there's definitely some people out there who will say, "Oh, if you're doing machine learning, you don't need to know calculus or statistics." And I was like, I don't know, or linear algebra, and like it's literally what everything's based upon. You should at least, I would say, have a understanding of the basic mechanics of these things, right? Like matrices,
right?
Basic how do probabilities work? Because otherwise, I mean, otherwise you're just juggling around an API. But the difference with these APIs when you're writing machine learning code is there's a lot of randomness, like just stochastic elements to it that you can't control. That's the huge difference. Whereas if you're writing software, it should be very deterministic. It should work. This is not the case with machine learning, or even stats in a lot of cases. It's just very random. That's kind of the nature of it. And so that understanding the math, I think, to your point, Jess, is insanely key. I've always hated it when people said you don't need to know math to do machine learning. I'm kind of like, I don't know.
You maybe don't need a math degree, but like, you should have some fundamentals in math.
Well, and I don't think you need to know all the proofs necessarily.
You don't need to know the proofs.
What's lacking is the conceptualization. Like when we talk about, dimension reduction, peripheral component analysis and such, what does that mean? It actually has there are very clear conceptual ideas around this. If you understand them, it really helps you to understand.
Well, like what's a dimension, right?
What's a dimension? Even if you're in a 10-dimensional space, what does that mean? Anyway.
Guys, we really went down a rabbit hole there.
We did. Sorry, it's your fault. You started.
I did. I started it.
You know who you're dealing with here.
Right.
We can keep going too if you'd like.
Hey, it's your people, your viewers. Give them what they want.
But no, I mean, it's absolutely right. I didn't know that math was that interesting, because when I see a lot of the math essentials for data science for ML, I'm like, I wonder how they sell, right? But it seems like that's really encouraging to hear that they're popular.
I mean, and that was I know at O'Reilly, like that was a big gap. I was like, where's all the math? Like, how do we not have any math stuff? We did, but it was data science from scratch, and that was about it. And so I worked with Hala Nelson on Essential Math for AI.
Yep.
Yep. And and Thomas Neild on Essential Math for Data Science.
Really good book.
Yeah. And so, and I don't know how they're selling, but I suspect that they're going to do well for like a long period, even if they're not like, hot potatoes right the second.
Right. Because it's still relevant, right?
Yeah. So, there are no fundamentals of data engineering, but I'm sure.
Oh, I mean, come on. Our book is not mathy either. But it's funny because the machine learning books I would read back in the day, starting with like Tom Mitchell's Machine Learning, I think that was published in the 90s, and that's like all math. It was a math book, right? And so even like elements of statistical learning, like the sort of the Bible of machine learning, at least basic machine, that is a math book,
right?
There's no way around it. And so but you shouldn't be scared of it. But again, it's just, I don't know, but I'm glad it's happening. It's cool. but then you have GPT that doesn't, need to know how it does anything. You just give it words and
I mean, we'll
Is
see.
it,
Yeah.
does it do well with math?
No, it sucks.
Yeah.
Oh,
Also,
really?
I think it's getting better, but okay, so I'll give you an example. This guy posted on LinkedIn that he gave it a basic multiplication problem. I think it was 83 times 83 times 83, like maybe 83, 5 times. So you could just,
Mhm.
83 to the fifth power, whatever, right? But what it did, he has to solve it, and it came back with like this weird. Remember the earn problems you do in probability?
oh, so it's treated it as a probability.
It treated it as a
problem
probability,
instead.
so it was one
Yeah.
minus 88 and so forth, things like and the numbers were, and every time
Oh,
he ran it, it came with a different answer.
Yeah.
interesting.
Which is
Yeah.
really weird. Yeah, because I was like, oh, that's that one thing,
Yikes.
probability class
Yeah.
that, but it couldn't figure out basic multiplication.
Well, there's a big controversy going on over the last couple of days. I don't know if you follow this, Joe, but OpenAI published these different stats about how well these models GPT-4 would do on the LSAT, for example. Well, then
Yeah.
people started testing deeper. They started testing it with code as well, with like leak code problems and things. And there's evidence that it was actually it actually memorized the answers on a lot of these exams. And so they said there's a cutoff. If you give it certain leak code problems, it gets them perfectly correct. If you go just beyond that, it completely garbles the answers. And so there's some evidence that like we're still having trouble with some of these emergent behaviors, that it's maybe more memorization than.
But what are your thoughts though on using like kind of generative AI for course and learning?
Yeah, I think we should use all the tools we got, and as you would with anything you Google or research, or that you should always have some like tech reviewer, to take a look at it, have a second pair of eyes, just to make sure that the person generating the content is like confirming that what they're developing, using this tool is accurate, and that you've got a second set of eyes to look at it and sort of poke holes in it. So I think like if you do that and you're aware of its pitfalls, like I don't think there's any reason not to use it. But you've got to do your due diligence for sure.
You got to do your due diligence for sure. Speaking of due diligence, is that Chris Tab?
Hi, Chris.
Chris is not back yet.
What's that?
Oh, okay.
Oh, the other Chris Tab. Okay, never mind. Hey, what's up, again? So anyway, what's that? Okay, no worries. We're just recording a podcast here. Sorry. So we're sharing a house with a bunch of people here, so it's kind of it's pretty hilarious.
Well, like frat party over there.
Yeah, you could say that. So
the math frat.
Math frat. Well, yeah, data frats. So kind of switching gears to pushing. There's I think a lot of interest in people want to write books. I know we get a lot of questions. I'm sure you get a lot of questions. I guess in the next 10 minutes, what do people need to know if they want to write a tech book?
Oh boy. Well, I could go on for a lot longer than 10 minutes about this. But I think like do your research, like if you want to write a tech book, I would recommend coming up with a few different ideas. Have a list of things that you feel like could be interesting. And then like go see what's on the market, go see where the gaps are, where you think you could do something better, newer, more, interesting, more dynamic. And then start to like really develop that idea and start to think about, know who your audience is, like, have a really clear idea of what the persona is, what the kind of book buyers they are, what other books do they buy, how sophisticated they are, if your book is going to be very technical, if it's going to include code, or if it's going to be more non-technical, more general. There's I think a happy medium where you don't want it to be too tool specific, because those tools will likely change very quickly. But you might be writing about a tool. So like, how do you like anticipate what's coming down the pike on their roadmaps? How do you talk to the right people about, sort of like the new features and things like that? And, I think it's if you want to publish traditionally, get your idea, write a proposal. Like you can grab a standard sort of book proposal from O'Reilly's website, or probably one of the other publishers. I'll have a pretty similar version. And then get in front of an editor, ideally with a little LinkedIn research, you can figure out who your likely editor would be based on your
What would
topic.
that title be called typically?
Oh, an acquisitions editor, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, who would kind of really help in terms of like thinking of your topic strategically and how a book might fit on their list. You know, they know what they're looking for, and they you know, or they might, you know, you might sort of alert them to something that's not been on their radar that they should be paying attention to. And honestly, it's good to just like have relationships with acquisitions editors. You should have relationships with editors at different publishers if you can, you know, like just to know what they're looking for. I mean, ideally you're doing that organically, like maybe at a conference, maybe, you know, or maybe you're just like, hey, I really like the work you've done. I saw you published XYZ book. You know, I'm thinking about something similar. You know, I think just try to have a conversation. If in, you know, and if you mention a topic and they're interested, they're gonna set up a call with you, you know, they're gonna want to talk more. So yeah, I think publishing is a business. You know, you have to think about how it's going to fit in with the market and how a publisher is going to make money and how, you know, it's going to make sense compared to what the stuff that you don't even know that they might have going on too. What else is on their list in progress. So just having conversations is really like the great first step. And then like, you know, then you can kind of find out what they're looking for. I don't think that's always the best way to like say, I'm going to write a book, I'll just write whatever they want. But like there might be an overlap in terms of what your interests are and what theirs are. I mean, I can go on, but like those I think are some like first steps that make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's good to get, I think from your perspective too, being the acquisitions editor who we worked with at O'Reilly to sign up. And I'll be frank with the audience. I mean, Jess was tough with us. She was really tough. And I think it came from all the right places. There were definitely times when we'd hop on the call. We're just like, I don't know if she likes this book. I don't know if she likes us. But here we are. So, but it was good. I mean, it was a good kind of reality check, right? And so, because I think you get into your own ideas a lot and you think it's the greatest thing in the universe. But the thing is, like, people like yourself, I mean, you see, you know, authors and potential authors all the time. And so it's like,
yeah. And I will say, and it's not personal, I was harder on you guys than I think of a lot of other folks, just because your idea was a lot more ambitious than a lot of other folks. It was going to be much harder. So I was like, you know, and I knew there was a gap. I knew there was like this opportunity for a big book in the space, but I was like, we've got one shot at this, you know, and this has to be, all the things have to go right for this to work. And they did, you know, I think that worked out great. The right authors, the right topic, the right sort of approach. I think the right kind of marketing strategy in terms of really turning on your network. And you know, it was great. But I think I knew it was like, I'm not gonna like half-ass this. Like, let's like put them through their paces. Let's make sure we have the right idea. And then it's funny, I was remembering that like a few months in. So as an acquisitions editor, you sign the book, you sort of get the contract going, you kind of move things along, and then you bring in a development editor. So Nicole Taché was on this book, and she's a total pro and has done all these excellent books. So I knew the book would be in good hands, and you know, so I'd sort of keep in touch with her and be like, "How's it going?" And you know, then everything was going really smooth. And then a couple months in, she's like, you know, I think we might have to have a call with Joe and Matt. I was like, what's going on? She was like, well, they kind of want to change their table of contents. I was like, Jesus Christ, what are these guys doing? And then I was like, oh boy, they're like, and I was like, oh no, they're rethinking everything. They're like, you know, crisis of confidence. And then we got on, and you guys actually had like a good plan, and it made sense, like why you wanted to move things around, and sort of kind of based on sort of the generation of the book as you'd been working on it and the progress you'd made, and that things like didn't make sense in the original, you know, order, and you know, like not major tweaks, I don't think at the time, but I was like, oh, okay, actually, I think they know what they're talking about. Like,
those would be red flags. And I think even during our during the book proposal process, we had changed a few things too. And you're like, okay, don't do that. Or have a good reason for this, and you better be a good reason. So
yeah.
But it reminds me of designing a tech architecture, right? Like a data architecture, for example, and you draw it all out and then you start building and you're like, this doesn't quite make sense. Maybe we swap one component or we organize something. I think it was similar to that. It wasn't that we
Yeah.
were rethinking the entire architecture. It's just as you get into it, you're like a slight
It was
reorder
the
here, maybe
undercurrents, I
rethink.
think, that we
Yeah,
changed,
yeah,
and that was actually the biggest benefit of the book,
yeah,
I think.
yeah.
And so yeah, that was interesting though. I mean, I would say that, yeah, thanks for being, hard on us. I would prefer that
Anytime.
versus, yeah, I,
You're here for us.
yeah,
Right.
being on the podcast. So yeah, it was definitely interesting, and I think to be fair, I think we were treated differently, because I know other people that have published with O'Reilly, and I don't think their experience sort of reflected what we
Well, and not every editor works the same way. You know, I
Yeah.
spent a lot more time on proposals than some other folks did, and because I felt like it saved you issues down the road. If folks
Yeah.
had a really clear idea in the beginning, like it's way more likely that a book is gonna like get to the end and be successful. Versus, if you don't do that work, we see a lot of books that just like never make it to the finish line and kind of get hung up, and
That's
for a variety of different reasons. But so I like to think that some of that proposal work helps to avoid that.
yeah, it does. I mean, so maybe you can say, maybe you can't, but I mean, roughly, like, out of how many proposals you go through, like how many books actually end up getting signed, and then how many of those end up getting finished?
And then how many, what's success like at the end? I guess that's the other question.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
maybe I would say like maybe like 50 to 60% of the proposals I looked at, we like moved forward with, became books. Maybe more. It depends. I think like it depends too, like earlier on, like you kind of want to get more signs. Like also you've got this like quota you got to hit, so you're like, I got to get books. And sometimes that quota goes up and you're like, oh shit, like sorry, I got to move this forward. And, but then you start to be a little bit more savvy, or you build out your list and you feel a little bit more like, oh, I can be really selective, like
Yeah.
I don't have to bring in so many. And then I think, not a lot of books would like not make it, maybe like 10-20% like just wouldn't get published.
Interesting.
But for and like for a variety of different reasons. But it's interesting that things like you learn over the years, there are things like that I would see the red flags, of course, like a few years in that like I didn't see earlier on. And and sometimes you listen to them and sometimes you don't. But I'm trying to like let that serve me in my role now, especially like, when folks don't feel like super committed, and like, you've got to get through like hours and hours of video with them, like they're gonna bail on you if they're not like totally into it. So yeah, so it helps. I've learned a lot for sure.
Yeah, I mean, how do you pick out what type of a book is going to be successful, or do you know?
I think a lot of it was, we had to research the trends a lot. So we kind of knew, and I don't mean like kind of like like just like the next hot thing, but like what we saw having some longevity, and like, and where people were struggling. A lot of it was like, what challenges are they running into? What solutions can we
Yeah.
provide? And that might have been like a particular tool that folks needed, or like, or it could have been, like, or just like, oh, look, streaming data is like a bigger deal now. We should like develop more content around this. So yeah, so it was usually like figuring out like, when a trend had legs, and trying to build around that. And then again, sometimes it was like not a trend, it was like math, it was like something that like just had kind of been overlooked, or, or we had an opportunity to develop a lot more content than we had before. So it's just sort of like fine-tuning your research around sort of what was happening in the space, and talking to people constantly, like just having a lot of conversations with people in the space, going to conferences, just in like going, just listening to what people are presenting on. That was usually a really good opportunity for us to like pick up on themes, and, and start developing content around those.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of what like an A&R at a record label would do.
Yeah, I'm sure very similar.
Yeah, I guess be on SoundCloud now, be at Spotify, and go to the clubs and just listen to what people are playing, and
Yeah.
as good as any. That's really interesting. What do you think the future of tech publishing looks like?
I don't think things are going to change that much, to be honest. I think publishing's been very much the same for a long time. I think generative AI could kind of throw things for a loop a little bit. There's going to be a lot of just crap content out there,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but that's no change, really. There's been a lot of crap content for a long time. You know, I like in my heart of hearts hope that like there is some disruptor to Amazon, because I just think there's so much crap, and I think very little trust in products on Amazon, and a lot of counterfeit content. So that would be my hope, that there was, I don't know, changes, or even a different marketplace for just a better one for books. I'm really in dire need of that across all, you know, tech publishing, all kinds of publishing. I think that's an issue throughout. But yeah, I don't know that like the publishing process is going to change that much. It's worked pretty well for the last however many years.
Many centuries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reading a paperback book upstairs right now, and it's just like, it's a book. I don't know. That's words.
Yeah.
Should we go start a newspaper? Is that?
Let's go start. Yes, with real paper. Yes.
Yeah.
It's weird in France, actually. I see everyone's reading newspapers there.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw a guy I saw the weirdest thing. I saw a guy buy a magazine at a magazine stand.
That's true.
Wow.
They still have stands. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. I was like,
really sweet.
Hipster? No, he's just buying a magazine. It's like a rock and roll magazine. Right. Yeah. What's going on?
No, it's true. It's like I still read paperback books. Like I've never had an e-reader. I never wanted one. I get it. I get why it would interest people, but at the same time, like O'Reilly books, I do read on the O'Reilly platform. I don't necessarily like get the books.
By the way, this helps the authors more than if you buy the print book. So just
Or slice,
yes, exactly. So it's all about the money.
And make sure you sign as many books as you see, because they can't be returned if you sign them.
Okay.
I can't believe I didn't tell you that before. Yeah, that's like number one. Anywhere you go, if you go to Barnes and Noble and they have them, sign them.
No, okay.
Because you can't return them.
Wait, can you sign them? People just sign their own books on the shelf, like before.
Yeah. Go anytime you're in a bookstore, go see if they have your book, sign it. Don't ask, just do it.
Yeah, I'm doing them a favor, actually, so you don't have to return. So
now your audience is getting a taste of me, like, or you know, bossing you guys around. So this is what it was
like. We're used to it. So
it worked. I mean, we obviously needed it.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. That's cool. Well, awesome. I know we got to close out a bit earlier because we have to upload this, and there's a 60-minute time limit on the videos. So I think we'll kind of winding down in a second here, but yeah, this is really cool. Like I'm excited that, you know, we're still talking. So like, yeah,
I'm not going away anytime soon.
No, I'm really stoked about it, and I'm really excited about your success at Anaconda. It's cool seeing you, I think, you know, flourish in ways that you know, I would say is not traditional media right now, right? So that's really cool that you're able to evolve and adapt into that. So it's freaking awesome. So
thank you.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
What kind of books do you read, by the way, in your spare time?
I knew you were going to ask me this question. And listen, I'm a bad reader. I like don't read much at all. I read a lot online, and like I read a lot of articles. I read a lot of like just nonsense.
Or like the Onion?
I'll tell you my secret. Like I wrote like a rom-com novel, and like I have to return to it and like actually try to get an agent, but I've been just, you know, busy. So I was reading a lot of rom-coms just to like get a sense of like what's hot now. So that was kind of like a funny time where like, so they're adorable and like I don't have to think very hard. So so that's been like kind of what I've read lately, but yeah, now you know my dark secret about my rom-com.
So one thing I was thinking of writing, so I have Kindle Unlimited, so they'd pop up all these romance novel titles, and there's this genre of billionaire romance novels, like having affairs with your billionaire boss. So let me read you a couple titles here. This might inspire you.
Can you read some passages, Joe?
So Marrying My Billionaire Boss, it says 2,900 reviews. So I started looking at books that had a lot of reviews, and there's some of these that had like 29,000 reviews. It was
That's crazy.
Yeah, Taming Mr. Walker and Enemies to Lovers age gap romance.
An age gap, wow.
Yeah,
they just tell you the genre there. That's
Big
great.
Bossy Mistake, an accidental baby romance.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
wild.
I saw one with like 29,000 reviews. Showing everyone, it was like, if you want to make a lot of money in publishing, just go write trashy romance and use stuff, but this shouldn't be,
Yeah.
use your brain to do this. You'll be weird.
Yeah, I'm curious, like how that would do. Like, I wonder if these are any good. I mean,
No, they're terrible. I downloaded a couple samples and I read them. I was like, this is like, it's hilarious.
It's just dirty secret.
Yeah, yeah.
we're really just sharing now.
Well, now, yeah, I mean, I read a lot of books, and now you know what I read a lot of.
You do. You read way more than I do. I know.
Yeah,
I need your.
find
I
out
need
they're
your
all
reading list.
billionaire romance novels, and so it doesn't really count.
Right.
Yeah, I'm kidding, but no, the rom-com genre, I don't know anything about that. I'm sure it will do well. It seems tech is the one where I'm kind of like, yeah, it does okay, but not like that okay. So
it's tricky. There's like a lot more competition. Everyone wrote a novel during COVID, so it's just trying to, if you want to do the traditional thing, get an agent and like kind of go the traditional route. There's a lot going on. So I've had like 35 rejections, I think, so far. So
wow.
Only like 100 more to go, and then I'll
crazy.
probably,
and you're like an acquisitions editor, so you should like, like, hey, we're.
I don't think it helps me one bit.
No, there's like your books, yeah, whatever.
Whatever.
That's awesome. Well, when it's out, let us know. Maybe publish it on Substack or something like that.
There we go. That sounds great.
Awesome. Well, for people who want to learn more about you or get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the best. Jess Haberman, and then I'm also at Jess Haberman on Twitter. Although I mostly just like yell at sports teams there, so I'm not sure it's like
that's where she does all the writing and reading is Twitter.
Yeah, pretty much. I know. Yeah, and like I'd love for folks to check out Anaconda Learning. I'll throw a link in the chat. And like let us know what you think. Give you a free trial, and would love your thoughts. What else should we develop? What trainings do you guys like do people want? And any bright ideas, or folks who want to like give trainings, like there's lots of opportunities, so definitely
it's true. You've almost convinced me, so
I know we're really working on it, like lots of convincing. When you're done like skiing in your chalet and everything, maybe you'll talk to me again.
Yeah, you'd be in good hands with him, so not so much with me on the math part. That's really, really cool. Well, cool. And you'll be at PyCon, I'm guessing, or
I'll be at PyCon, yeah.
Nice.
The 20th to the 23rd.
Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully
City, you better be there.
Yeah.
So Python World's gonna be there.
Yeah.
So I'll be there because I live there. So
yes.
You can come to my chalet and come hang out and have a beer.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Let's do that.
My cabin's like this place.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It is.
Are you right in Salt Lake City? Or I suppose you don't have to give your address on this live stream.
Yeah, so my address is I'm just kidding. No, but I'm in Salt Lake City. Yeah. So I can just ride my bike down. It's fine. So,
awesome. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.